Your daughter does not deserve a sweet 16. My mother said it with a straight face, like she was commenting on the weather. Not after what she did to your niece. My daughter, Olivia, had refused to give her new art workstation to my sister's kid. I said nothing. I did not argue. I just canceled the party I had planned. $68,000 was the budget. Instead, I flew just my daughter to the Amalfi Coast for her birthday. We posted one photo. Within an hour, my sister was commenting, "We need to talk. Have you ever been called selfish just for protecting something you worked hard for? Tell me your story down in the comments." I sat at the mahogany table in my parents' estate, watching my sister Jessica smirk. She looked like she had just won a major closing deal. My mother, Kimberly, was already crossing Olivia's name off a mock seating chart with a thick red marker. The dining room was buried in silk swatches and $500 a plate catering menus. They thought they were teaching a lesson in humility. They thought they were the board of directors, and I was just the entry-level employee, lucky enough to fund their lifestyle. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. It felt like reading a bad audit. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of a family. I had subsidized their smiles and bankrolled their sense of belonging. But $68,000 is a high price to pay for a room full of people who treat your child like an afterthought. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I did not give them the satisfaction of a public breakdown. This was not an emotional crisis. It was a balance sheet correction. I simply gathered my bag, felt the cold weight of my keys in my hand, and walked out. The Berkshire's air was crisp and biting, but I felt colder. By the time I reached my office in Greenwich, the clarity had settled in. This was not a family dispute. It was a liquidation. I opened my laptop and felt the blue light hit my face like a baptism. I did not hesitate. I pulled up the folder for the Sweet 16 gala. Every contract, every vendor agreement, every signature was neatly filed. The venue was first. The exclusive country club where my mother wanted to show off her daughter's success to her friends. I hit the contact link. We are canceling contract number 5501. Forfeit the deposit, refund the balance. The caterer followed. The floral designer who had quoted $12,000 for centerpieces that would be in the trash by Sunday morning. Canceled. The disc jockey, the lighting crew, the luxury limousine service. With every click, I felt a knot in my chest loosen. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and today, their credit had finally run out. They were not shocked by what I was doing because they did not even know yet. They were just comfortable. They were sitting back in their Berkshire estate, waiting for the next transfer, assuming my silence meant I was still playing along. They thought they had the power to dictate my daughter's worth while I footed the bill. I looked at the automatic transfers tab next. $1,200 a month to my parents for their lifestyle maintenance. $600 bi-weekly to Jessica to cover her constant, unexpected expenses. I hovered over the delete button. There was no panic, no second guessing. I hit the button. Then I did it again. One by one, the pipelines of my labor were shut down. Inside the office, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I pulled up a new tab. I searched for flights, not to a ballroom in Connecticut. I looked for Italy. I booked 2 seats, business class. I booked a hotel with a balcony that overlooked the Mediterranean. Total cost was $15,000, a fraction of the gala, but a massive investment in the only person who actually mattered. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. I was not punishing my family. I was finally choosing my kid. The performance was over. I had finally unplugged the family bank. I had become the private equity firm for a family that never once offered me a dividend of respect. For years, I was the one who kept the lights on at the Berkshire estate. When the property tax bill came due $18,000 that my parents had conveniently forgotten to save for, I was the one who wired the funds without a word. I told myself I was doing it for the legacy. I told myself I was preserving a family home for my daughter to visit. But in reality, I was just subsidizing my own erasure. Every family gathering followed the same amortization schedule. I would pay for the $500 bottles of wine and the organic grass-fed steaks, and in return, I was allowed to sit at the table and watch them worship Jessica. They would spend hours discussing my niece Ashley's cheerleading schedule, while my daughter, Olivia, sat at the far end of the table, sketching in her notebook, completely invisible to them. I remember the holiday card photo from 2 years ago. They had hired a professional photographer on my dime, of course. When I saw the final print, my heart did not break. It just calculated the loss. Olivia was not in the frame. My mother told me she had too much charcoal on her hands and it would have ruined the aesthetic of the shoot. Jessica's daughter was front and center, wearing a designer dress that I had bought her for her birthday. Looking back, I realize I was caught in the invisible chains of the survivor. People see a woman like me successful, analytical, and wealthy, and they assume my silence is a sign of weakness. They think I let them walk all over me because I am afraid of their disapproval. But they do not understand the house of cards I was desperately trying to protect. My compliance was not a lack of spine. It was a calculated effort to buy my daughter a peace I never had. I thought if I just paid enough, if I absorbed enough of their cruelty, it would never reach her. I was acting as the human shield for a child who did not even know she was in a war zone. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be useful because I knew, deep down, that I was not loved. I was the reliable one, the daughter who did not need attention, the sister who could handle the emergencies, and my family loved that about me. They loved my utility. They loved the $1,200 I sent every month like clockwork. They loved the $600 I sent to Jessica whenever her latest business venture had a bad quarter. But my value was strictly tied to my liquidity. The moment I set a boundary for my daughter, the moment I stopped being a resource, I became a monster. I rubbed my eyes at my desk, trying to summon a single ounce of regret for canceling that gala, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was an exit strategy. The house of cards had already fallen. There was no more peace left to buy. Jessica did not knock. She still had a spare key from the time I had the flu 3 years ago, a key I had never bothered to ask back because I thought we were sisters. She breezed into my Greenwich home, the smell of her expensive, heavy perfume clashing with the quiet scent of my morning coffee. She was holding a designer cup in one hand and her phone in the other, her eyes already scanning my living room for a target. "Where is it?" she asked, skipping any form of greeting. I was sitting at the kitchen island, reviewing a series of risk assessment reports. I did not look up. I knew exactly what she was looking for. Olivia was in her studio upstairs, the door locked, probably wearing those noise-canceling headphones I bought her to drown out the sound of a family that only knew how to take. "The workstation!" Jessica snapped, her voice rising. "Ashley is starting her senior portfolio and her laptop is ancient. It is practically a brick. She needs something that can actually run the software for her college applications." I looked up then. My gaze was flat, professional. I treated her like a hostile takeover attempt. "Ashley is 17, I said. "Olivia is 15. Olivia is using that workstation to build her own portfolio for the pre-college art intensive she was accepted into. It is not a toy. It is a tool for her future." Jessica let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Her future? Emily, she is a child. She draws pictures. Ashley needs this for real-world applications. Besides, you make enough in a month to buy 10 of those things. Why are you being so stingy with your own niece? It is just sitting there. You are rewarding Olivia for being selfish." I felt the familiar thrum of a headache starting at the base of my skull. It was not stinginess. It was a boundary. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. "I can help you find a mid-range laptop for Ashley," I said, maintaining my clinical tone. "I can even find you a refurbished model that fits your budget. But we are not handing over Olivia's workstation." Jessica's face contorted. The supportive sister mask slipped, revealing the raw entitlement underneath. "Wow," she whispered, her eyes narrow. "I did not realize you were this cold. Our father would be ashamed of you, Emily. He always said family comes first. You are hoarding wealth while your sister is struggling to give her child a chance." I walked toward the hallway, stepping in front of the stairs to block her path. My heart was pounding, but my voice was ice. You want to talk about our father? I asked. Then let's talk about legacy. That workstation was not bought with a year-end bonus. I did not just pick it up on a whim. I leaned in, making sure she could see the lack of emotion in my eyes. That workstation was purchased using the payout from the life insurance policy Olivia's father left behind. It was his final contribution to her dreams. He wanted to make sure that even if he was not here, she had the tools to become the artist he knew she could be. It is the only thing she has left of his support. Jessica did not even blink. She did not soften. She did not apologize. She just scoffed, rolling her eyes as she adjusted the strap of her bag. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Emily, she spat. It is just a tax-deductible toy. You are just using his memory to justify being a control freak. Just remember this when Ashley does not get into a good school because her own aunt cared more about a piece of plastic than family. She stormed out, the front door rattling the frames on the wall as it slammed shut. I stood in the silence, the smell of her perfume still lingering like a stain. I did not go to Olivia. I did not try to explain. I went back to my laptop. The family ATM was officially out of service. I stopped checking the group chat. I did not answer the 15 missed calls from my mother or the barrage of texts from Jessica that ranged from pleading to hysterical. I went back to my spreadsheet. In my world, numbers do not have emotions. They do not gaslight, and they do not demand you set your own child on fire to keep them warm. They just balance, or they do not. I met with my head accountant and a forensic auditor the next morning. We sat in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the harbor, the morning sun reflecting off the water with a precision I admired. I was not there to vent. I was there to de-risk my life. I handed over the authorization to freeze every secondary account linked to my primary estate. The $1,200 that hit my mother's account on the first of every month canceled. The $600 that Jessica used as a buffer for her shopping habit every 2 weeks terminated. The shared credit card for family emergencies that somehow always ended up charging designer shoes and spa days revoked. By noon, the digital silence was broken. My phone buzzed with a notification from my mother. It was not a call. It was a formal email, likely dictated by her bridge club ego. She told me I was being disrespectful. She told me that if I did not reinstate the transfers and apologize for the shame I had brought upon the family by canceling the gala, she would have no choice but to disinherit me. She said I would never see a dime of the Berkshire estate. I stared at the screen and felt a small, sharp smile pull at the corners of my mouth. This was the power illusion of an empty wallet. For my entire life, I had been conditioned to fear her disapproval. I had been taught to respect the authority of the family legacy. But as I looked at the audit in front of me, I realized that authority was a performance I had been subsidizing. They thought they were the ones holding the cards because they held the titles and the history. But titles do not pay property taxes. History does not fix a leaking roof or fund a country club membership. My mother was threatening to lock me out of a house that would have been sold at auction 3 years ago if I had not stepped in. Her power was just an overhead expense I had decided to stop paying. I did not reply to her email. I did not try to explain that I was the one who had been keeping them relevant. Instead, I instructed the auditor to look deeper. I wanted a full accounting of Olivia's minor trust fund. It was a small fund, $300,000 left by her father, meant to sit untouched until she turned 21. My mother and I were co-trustees, a gesture of goodwill I had made when I was still trying to buy their love. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the cold weight of the room. This was not a breakdown. This was a forensic deep dive. I was not just unplugging the bank. I was checking the vaults to see what else they had taken while I was busy being the reliable one. This time, the glow of my laptop didn't feel like a tool for clarity. It felt like a spotlight on a crime scene. I wasn't just looking at spreadsheets anymore. I was performing a financial autopsy on my own family. Every click of the mouse revealed a new layer of betrayal that a simple audit could no longer fix. The auditor, a man who had spent 30 years deconstructing corporate greed and messy divorces, did not look up as I entered. He simply slid a single, thick manila folder across the polished glass table. It sat there like a ticking clock. I opened it, and the air in the room seemed to vanish. There it was. A trust fund authorization form, dated exactly 14 months ago. The amount was written in bold, unforgiving ink, $120,000. I looked at the signature line. It said my name. But the E was too round, and the E did not have the sharp clinical tail I had developed over a decade of signing high-stakes contracts. It was a clumsy, desperate forgery. I did not feel the heat of anger. I felt the cold, heavy weight of absolute finality. This was not a disagreement over a party or a workstation. This was a direct, criminal raid on my daughter's future. The auditor flipped to the second page, showing the wire transfer details. The money had not gone to a medical bill or a business emergency. It had been wired directly to the lender holding the secondary mortgage on Jessica's townhome. The same sister who had sat across from me at family dinners, drinking wine I paid for, and complaining that her budget was so tight she could barely afford Ashley's cheerleading uniforms. While I was wiring her a $600 buffer every 2 weeks to keep her head above water, she was sitting on $120,000 of Olivia's money. Money that had been intended to be a sacred legacy from her father. And my mother, as the co-trustee, hadn't just signed her name. She had unearthed a durable power of attorney I'd signed years ago for estate taxes and never revoked. By flagging the withdrawal as an emergency medical expense for Olivia, she bypassed the bank's secondary authorization and wired the entire balance directly to Jessica. I rubbed my thumb over the forged signature. They had treated my daughter like a resource to be harvested. They had looked at a grieving child's safety net and saw a way to pay off Jessica's bad investments. They thought they could take what they wanted because I was the reliable one. They assumed my silence was a guarantee of their immunity. The shame my mother mentioned in her email was not about the gala. It was the projection of her own guilt. They were terrified of an audit because they knew exactly what I would find. The workstation confrontation was not about a laptop. It was about reestablishing the dynamic where Olivia's needs were secondary to their desires. They needed her to stay the extra so they could keep playing with her inheritance. I did not pick up the phone. I did not send a screaming text to the family group chat. That would have been an emotional response, and I was well beyond emotion. I was in a state of pure accounting. I called my lead attorney and instructed him to prepare the documentation for a formal police report. Forgery, embezzlement, misappropriation of trust funds. The words were clinical and lethal. This was the kill shot. By using my daughter's grief to fund their entitlement, they had removed any possibility of a bridge back to me. The paper trail was clear, and it led directly to the end of the Henderson family legacy. I closed the folder, the sound of the snap echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. The performance was over, and the lights were finally going out. The doorbell rang at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. I did not need to check the security camera. I knew the rhythm of their desperation. Kimberly and Jessica stood on my porch, the heavy Berkshire fog clinging to their coats like the weight of the secrets I had just uncovered. My mother's eyes were red, but they were not the tears of a grieving grandmother. They were the frantic leaks of a woman who had just realized her safety net had been shredded. They did not come to apologize. They came to negotiate a bailout. "We have 48 hours, Emily," Jessica said, her voice trembling as she stepped forward. She was not wearing her designer heels this time. She looked smaller, diminished by the reality that the bank had sent the final foreclosure notice on the townhome. I later realized my monthly $1,200 gift was the only thing keeping a secret second mortgage from collapsing. By stopping the transfer, I triggered an immediate notice of default that had been looming for months. The bank gave them exactly 48 hours to pay the full arrears, or the foreclosure would become irreversible. "You cannot just watch us lose our home," my mother whispered, clutching her purse like a shield. "We are family. You have to think about the legacy. You have to think about Ashley. She needs stability for her senior year. You are being so cold, Emily. Our father would be ashamed to see you turning your back on your own blood over a few missed payments." I did not let them in. I stood in the doorway, a human wall built of facts and frozen assets. I did not feel the heat of anger, only the chilling clarity of a final audit. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. It was not a check. It was a copy of the forensic report and the authorization form with my clumsy, forged signature. $120,000 stolen from my daughter's trust. $120,000 that Jessica had used to pay off her secondary mortgage while telling me she was struggling to buy groceries. I have been thinking about legacy, I said, my voice as flat and clinical as a dial tone, and I realized that loyalty is a two-way contract. You breached that contract 14 months ago when you raided Olivia's future to fund your own entitlement. You did not just take money, you tried to harvest her safety net. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Jessica looked at the police report stapled to the back of the folder. The color drained from her face until she looked like the ghost she had tried to make of my daughter. I already did, I said, delivering the finisher with the precision of a closing statement. I protected the only family that matters. I am not your backup bank anymore. I am the woman who is pressing charges. I closed the door. The sound was not a bang. It was the quiet, definitive click of a deadbolt. Everything stayed silent for days after that. I sat in my Greenwich office and opened the family spreadsheet one last time. I stared at the numbers, the years of subsidizing people who marginalized my child. I hit the delete button. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through until morning. No guilt, no noise. 2 weeks later, the Mediterranean sun was painting the water in shades of sapphire and gold. Olivia sat on the balcony of our hotel on the Amalfi Coast, her new art workstation humming quietly beside her. She was not sketching in the corner of her room where she was not wanted. She was at the center of the frame, painting the sunrise with a piece that did not cost $68,000. We did not have a gala. We had a small lemon cake with one bright sparkler and the sound of the waves. As I watched her, I realized that some of you listening right now are the bridges in your own families. You are the reliable ones, the ones who pay the taxes, fix the roofs, and swallow the insults because you think you are buying peace for your children. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. You cannot buy respect from people who only see you as a resource. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and I finally realized that their authority was just a performance I was bankrolling. If putting your child first costs you your family's approval, then that approval was never about love. It was a subscription fee for your compliance. To the outsiders, the quiet ones, the ones who have been told they are selfish for finally saying no. Stop paying for a seat at a table where you are only invited for your wallet. Build your own table, piece by piece, with your own two hands. The Berkshire estate is being sold to pay back the trust fund. My mother and sister are moving into a 2-bedroom apartment they have to pay for themselves. The performance is over, and the lights are finally out. I looked at the photo of Olivia laughing under the Italian sun, and I realized I did not lose a family. I finally found the one that mattered. If you have finally found the courage to choose your child over a toxic legacy, hit that share button. Let us remind everyone that love is not a debt. It is a choice. Subscribe to join a community that values authenticity over performance.